This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
ICC finds Ugandan LRA commander guilty of war crimes, but some victims say he is innocent. 16 African nations show interest in AU COVID-19 vaccines plan. And United States President Joe Biden delivers a first major foreign policy speech. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are stories making headlines this hour. In business news, South Africa's mining industry to support COVID-19 vaccine rollout as cases surge. And in your sport, reinstated CAF chief Ahmed set to attend CHAN 2020 final on Sunday. We begin the hour in the Netherlands, where the International Criminal Court has finally convicted former child soldier and Lord's Resistance Army commander Dominic Ongwen. A three-judge panel says he is guilty of 61 crimes against humanity, including violence against women and girls, as well as killings and abductions. However, some of the victims of these atrocities say Ongwen is innocent, as he was forced to join the LRA when he was just a child. CGTN's Wanja Mungai reports.
The International Criminal Court made the ruling on Thursday. However, some of the victims of the Lord Resistance Army War say the conviction against Dominic Ongwen is unfair. They say he did not participate in the crimes out of free will. One of Ongwen's sympathizers is Sylvia Nakaute. She was the rebel group sex slave for 12 years since 2003. She eventually managed to flee to Finland.
It's really sad that some of the people who are paying consequences like the crimes he did are the people like Ongwen was not supposed to be convicted to me, although I'm a victim. Because the reason why I say so, you may wonder, but it sounds a bit crazy, but Ongwen is also a victim.
Ongwen is said to have been kidnapped at the age of 10 by the LRA and rose through the ranks of the rebel group to become a commander. He was arrested in the Central African Republic and transferred to ICC custody in January 2015. After a lengthy trial, a three-judge bench found him guilty of 61 crimes against humanity. All of those atrocities happened in northern Uganda between 2003 and 2005. The Lord Resistance Army was founded in 1987 by warlord Joseph Kony. His aim was to overthrow Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni's government and establish a theocratic state, one based on the biblical 10 commandments. However, the rebel group did not observe those commandments when it operated in northern Uganda. It terrorized villages there. The rebels' operations were characterized by rape, mutilations, killings, and abductions of children. Nakaute herself was one of Kony's sex slaves and even says she bore Kony a son.
Me, myself, I've given birth in the bush. I don't know where my son is. And I know the families are suffering, but their children are still in the bush. People's children are suffering. Some 20 years, they were there when they were 10 years. See now, like, he's saying something he didn't do. He was a victim. So when you are taken, what do you expect?
Louis Lacour is a former child soldier. He was once abducted and forced into joining LRA operations.
He commanded us to walk. He tied us with ropes, and he gave us heavy goods to carry on our head, and we should move. And he said he doesn't want weak people. He only wants people who are very strong. So if you ask that you want to rest, he say he can let you rest. And the rest thing he's saying, by killing you. I find that Dominic Ongwen should be forgiven because Dominic Ongwen also been adopted when he was a young boy. He didn't join the rebel by himself. He was being adopted and he was being tortured. The family members were being killed, like the parents. So he has all the trauma on his mind. That's why he was doing it. I feel so painful because now I don't have anyone. I don't have my parents, I don't have my sisters. I'm just alone in this world. I'm alone. So I feel so painful, but now I have no option. God has given me a way to move, and I'm moving. I only believe now in God. And what I've started to make my life be okay, I'm now training other war-affected youth, these child soldiers and child mothers. I've started a skill training center where I train them on mechanics, hairdressing, and tailoring.
The Lord Resistance Army no longer operates in Uganda since military operations ordered by President Yoweri Museveni pushed them out to neighboring countries. According to the United Nations, the terror group has killed more than 100,000 people and displaced close to 2.5 million others in Central Africa. Arrest warrants for the founder Joseph Kony have been in place since 2005, but his whereabouts remain unknown. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
Well, staying with that story, there have been some different reactions from Uganda, though, regarding the conviction of former rebel leader Dominic Ongwen by the ICC. There are those who welcome the ICC's ruling. Isabel Nakira spoke to some of his victims.
Internally displaced persons camps.
Those who experienced Dominic Ongwen's crimes firsthand have welcomed his conviction by the ICC. He was found guilty of 61 counts of causing sexual crimes and violence against civilians in internally displaced people's camps in northern Uganda. Victims of this war say painful memories brought about by the war can't easily be forgotten.
We were abducted by LRA from our school, St. Mary's College, Aboke, and we were between the ages of 12 and 15. My classmates died in the hands of the LRA. My classmates were abused by the LRA rebels. They were forced to become mothers as teenagers. It's just so unacceptable.
Ongwen was one of 5 top LRA commanders the ICC issued arrest warrants for. He surrendered to U.S. forces in the Central African Republic in 2015 before being handed to the ICC. Ongwen himself was abducted as a boy by the LRA in 1988 and became a child soldier. He rose through the ranks of the rebel outfit to become a commander. In his defense, he argued that he was forced into his actions by his abductors. But the court said there was no proof of that. Survivors say the LRA left wounds that can't be healed.
So many people lost their friends. I lost my relatives. I lost friends. And some, speaking like someone who was very close to this story and very close to some of the victims, I'm sure people of northern Uganda have moved on and they're forgiven Ongwen as a person, though they will never forget about the act.
We saw those perpetrators who were young, who were teenagers, but they were adults. They went ahead and did all this to us. So for me, justice has been served for my friends who died in the hands of the LRA.
The court in The Hague will sentence Ongwen at a later date. He could face life imprisonment. While victims of the LRA agree that some form of justice has been delivered by Ongwen's conviction, hundreds who are abducted are still missing, believed to be in captivity. Families of those who are missing simply do not know whether they are dead or alive. The leader of the LRA, Joseph Kony, who is also wanted by the ICC, is still at large. He is believed to be hiding in Kafia Kingi, a disputed enclave between the Central African Republic and Sudan. The Ugandan government says there is no threat from the LRA because it has been weakened, but until the top leaders are captured, many in northern Uganda still feel unsafe. Isabel Nakira, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
We're now joined by Oriem Nyeko, human rights activist and researcher at Human Rights Watch Africa Division. Thank you so much for joining us, Oriem. Judges will be handing down the sentence at a later date. We're hearing that Ongwen faces the possibility of life behind bars. Some are saying that initially he was a victim himself. Do you think that the ICC might consider striking a balance between those issues, the atrocities that he committed, and considering that he had been forced into this as well?
Well, thank you. Our messaging is that they should strike a balance in the sentencing, in that they should use that as a mitigating factor. In that he was abducted into and forcibly conscripted into the LRA as a child. While he obviously has been convicted on respect of crimes that he committed as an adult, which is a reflection of what the law that the ICC is governed by provides. I think it's really important to take into account the particular circumstances that he faced as having that both victim and perpetrator identity that he has.
But judges have also argued that Ongwen was mentally aware of his actions and did not do anything under duress. Could Ongwen, at some point, while he was doing whatever it is that he was doing as commander, as a child soldier, but especially when he was older, could he have said enough is enough and stopped any of the atrocities that he was doing at that time?
Well, the judge referred to evidence from people who are in the LRA captivity with him, who pointed out that he really was a very good commander, and he was very calculated in the things that he ordered and some of the crimes that he committed. So it didn't appear that there was any evidence that showed that he was forced to do any of the things. But at the same time, you know, speaking to people who were abducted, we know that there was a lot of traumatic things that people who were forced into captivity were forced to witness and to participate in. So I think it's important to understand the context in which he was in, but also recognize that he pretty much did these things as an adult and to a certain extent on his own free will.
And that's exactly, I think, what the ICC has been saying, is that they haven't found any evidence that he had been forced into doing any of these things. Considering that, Oriem, what do you think is the likelihood of what sentence they might hand down to him?
I'm not sure. I can't predict that at the moment. We are waiting for the sentencing hearings to start in April, at which point we will have a sense, I think, of what direction that is going to take. But again, just reiterating that we are calling for the judges to take into consideration his status as both a victim and a perpetrator to mitigate whatever sentence they eventually hand down.
Thank you so much for that, Oriem Nyeko. He's human rights activist and researcher at Human Rights Watch Africa Division. Let's move on to Libya, where Libya's political party representatives are expected to announce an interim administration on a Friday. The Transition Government Council would constitute of an interim prime minister and a three-person presidency. The move aims at bringing longtime rival factions together, that is the Government of National Unity and the Libyan National Army. This comes ahead of elections scheduled for the 24th of December. There have been efforts to remove foreign fighters from Libya by the UN and other states. Recently, the UN Security Council requested Secretary General Antonio Guterres to deploy observers to monitor the ceasefire. Well, 16 African countries have shown interest in securing 114 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccines under the African Union plan. Only a few African countries have started vaccinations, and the 55-member African Union hopes to see 60% of the continent's 1.3 billion people immunized in the next 3 years. The AU has so far secured around 670 million doses for its member states. The Africa CDC says allocations could be announced in the next 3 weeks. Well, Zimbabwean President Emerson Mnangagwa and Vice President Constantino Chiwenga have expressed gratitude to Chinese President Xi Jinping for donating COVID-19 vaccines to Zimbabwe. China is coordinating with Zimbabwe in the delivery and handover of the vaccines. The country aims to vaccinate at least 60% of its population. Mnangagwa says the first phase will see frontline workers, the elderly, and those with underlying medical conditions prioritized. The vaccinations will be free for all Zimbabweans who want them.
Allow me to take this opportunity to express our heartfelt and sincere gratitude to the President of the People's Republic of China, His Excellency Xi Jinping, the government and the people of China for their kind donation of 200,000 doses of the Sinopharm vaccine. We applaud China for taking a leading role in contributing to our national vaccine deployment strategy and for its consistent, humane policy of treating COVID-19 vaccines as global public goods. This kind of gesture is addition to the numerous donations, support and interventions made by China since the outbreak of the virus. It further attests to the fact that the People's Republic of China is indeed a true friend of Zimbabwe, whose relations has been enhanced to strategic partnership and cooperation.
We welcome and are very grateful to the People's Republic of China for their donation of the COVID-19 vaccine to Zimbabwe. The landmark gesture will achieve a milestone in combating the pandemic.
Meanwhile, South Africa reports that it is experiencing its second wave of COVID-19 infections. Without a vaccine, it's believed that the country could remain vulnerable to subsequent waves and mutations of the virus. Many local experts say they're optimistic that the first batch of vaccines will be rolled out to healthcare workers across the country, and that would be from this month. The Western Cape province, which has been one of the most affected regions, is preparing for that rollout. Renee Delcam tells us more.
The Cape Medical Depot normally handles vaccines for measles, polio and other diseases. Now the Western Cape Health Minister, Dr. Noma French Mbombo, says it's all systems go for the COVID-19 campaign.
The vaccine that we are getting first is called Covishield, which is coming. It's the vaccine that was developed by AstraZeneca in collaboration with Oxford University. It's been shown to be 70% effective against any COVID infection and close to 100% effective against severe disease. So yes, you might still get COVID if you've had the Covishield vaccine, but you will not get severe disease.
The Covishield vaccines will be stored in a dedicated cold chain area at an optimum temperature of between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius.
Vaccines are stored between 2 and 8 degrees. In each polystyrene box, there is a temperature logger. And that where on receipt, the receiving hospital or clinic opens the box and ensures that the range has been maintained.
The Cape Medical Depot team says it's ready to store and distribute the first 130,000 doses of the Covishield vaccines as part of its Phase 1 vaccine rollout to healthcare workers in the Western Cape province in the coming days.
The fact that within less than a year of the discovery of the coronavirus or the identification, we have several vaccines at our disposal is incredibly exciting and the single most important thing that we can do to combat this pandemic. So as soon as I am eligible, I will definitely be rolling up my sleeve for the vaccine, and I hope that everybody else will be as well.
Our motto is to save lives. So without our efforts and us distributing, many lives will be lost.
Security is expected to be extremely tight when the vaccines leave the Cape Medical Depot for hundreds of vaccine distribution sites across the Western Cape province. They'll be transported in unmarked courier vans with 24/7 satellite tracking, accompanied by undercover cops in unmarked police vehicles in certain cases. Renee Delcam, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Well, let's revisit one of our top stories for this hour. Libya's political party representatives are expected to announce an interim administration on Friday. The transition government council will constitute of an interim prime minister and a three-person presidency. And now for more on that, CGTN's Adel Muruki is in Cairo for us, and he's going to give us the latest. Adel, thank you so much for joining us. What is the latest on the political dialogue in Geneva?
The final round of negotiations and the round of voting will be held today. It's actually ongoing, and the voting procedure is about to take place. 4 lists are now on the table. Each list contains contains 4 members, 3 to be part of the presidency council and the prime minister, as you've mentioned. The Libyans who formed the political dialogue will start voting on the 4 lists. If any list gets more than 60% of the vote, it will be the winner. If not, another round of voting will take place also today between the 2 highest lists. And from all the 4 lists on the table, it seems that list number 4, that includes Aqila Saleh, the Speaker of the Eastern-based Parliament, is most likely to win. He will be in that list. He will be voted upon as the head of the Presidency Council. In the same list, we see politicians like Salam al-Gouaili from the eastern bloc of Libya and Fathi Bashagha, the current interim minister for the Government of National Accord, is on the same list as prime minister. It also includes a southern politician who has got most of the votes in the first rounds in the selection process. So this seems by far to be the strongest list and the most likely to win. Of course, we're waiting for the final say of the votes of the 75 members who will be choosing Libya's future until the election in December.
Adel, we're also hearing that the UN Security Council has requested the Secretary General to deploy monitors in Libya. What more can you tell us about this?
This comes after the 5+5 military commission meeting, which the UN has been sponsoring, reached an agreement to allow for unarmed monitors to come to the dividing line in Sirt and Al-Jufra, that's nearly in the middle northern coast for Libya. It's where the troops of both the eastern and western forces have been standing still for several months now, and it has been accepted to be the dividing line between their territories until a unified government is formed. And now this is a crucial step for the Security Council to pass such a notion to the Secretary General after Libyans have approved it, and it's quite essential to guarantee the success of the ceasefire, which, if it falls, the entire political process will fall as well. So this is where the entire future of Libya really depends on, to maintain a ceasefire and then move to the next phases of disarming that region and forming a unified military and police force that will guide the country throughout the next transition in its political life.
Thank you so much for that, Adel. Always good speaking with you. Adel Muruki speaking to us from Cairo. Well, let's all take a short break and return. More news making headlines, including U.S. President Joe Biden delivers a first major foreign policy speech. And Tunisia emphasizes the importance of early cancer screening.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching news making headlines right here on Africa Live. Well, let's head over to the United States, where President Joe Biden has delivered his first foreign policy speech more than 2 weeks after taking office. In the wide-ranging address, he touched on Yemen, Russia, China, and Myanmar. CGTN's Owen Ferkler reports.
Diplomacy is back, the words of new US President Joe Biden in his first major foreign policy address, setting out his ambitions for his new administration. And this was very much about breaking with the Trump administration's policy. For example, former President Donald Trump wanted closer relations with Saudi Arabia. Biden has announced that the US will withdraw its support for the Saudi-led coalition fighting Houthi rebels backed by Iran in Yemen. And where the Trump administration was characterized by threatening to withdraw from multilateral institutions and turning its back on some allies, Biden wants to embrace them in a new era of international cooperation.
Over the past 2 weeks, I've spoken with the leaders of many of our closest friends: Canada, Mexico, the UK, Germany, France, NATO, Japan, South Korea, Australia, to being reforming the habits of cooperation and rebuilding the muscle of democratic alliances that have atrophied over the past few years of neglect and, I would argue, abuse.
But there are limits to this cooperation. While Washington and Moscow have extended their treaty curbing their most destructive long-range nuclear missiles, Biden has said that he will confront Russia over its attempts to rig multiple elections here in the United States and beyond. And China has been described by Biden's administration as the single most important relationship, a relationship that deteriorated badly under the Trump administration with a trade war that was largely destructive to US businesses. Biden says he wants to change the tone of this relationship, even if the substance may remain the same, with Trump-era tariffs on Chinese imports into the United States remaining in place for now.
We'll also take on directly the challenges posed by our prosperity, security, and democratic values by our most serious competitor, China. But we are ready to work with Beijing when it's in America's interest to do so.
Many of these foreign policy themes are familiar for any US administration, but the situation in Myanmar does pose a major test for Biden, with the military takeover of the democratic elected government there led by Aung San Suu Kyi. Many Western allies and the United Nations are now discussing the reimposition of sanctions amid calls for the military to release Aung San Suu Kyi from detention. And while Biden has joined in those calls, he stopped short in this speech of declaring sanctions on Myanmar for now. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Well, for more on that, we're now joined by Dr. David Munyai. He is the International Relations and Foreign Policy expert, as well as the co-director at the University of Johannesburg Confucius Institute. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Munyai. Listening to President Biden's maiden foreign policy speech, nothing really much on Africa. What was your take on that?
It comes as no surprise, given the fact that the United States will concentrate much more on domestic issues, as well as going to its traditional ally. Africa has always been absent in the U.S. Foreign policy, regardless of the administration, whether it's Republican or Democrats. And it comes at a time when the crisis within the U.S., as well as its power globally, is on the decline. And therefore, I think one could see that President Biden is selecting issues that we can tackle alongside Western allies, centered around international liberal order, more on human rights issues. And Africa came indirectly, without being mentioned, on quite a number of issues, on health, on refugees and the like. But overall, this will be the trend. Africa won't occupy any large space within the U.S. foreign policy under President Biden.
Dr. Munyai, it's still early days for President Biden, but how do you compare foreign policies of the Biden compared to Trump's administration, just from his speech?
The speech is carried almost everything under the sun. And one is not sure if you will achieve that. More rhetorical. I think when it comes to practice, very soon President Biden will see quite a number of challenges, not emanating from the global stage, but more domestically when it comes to the division that are much more wider post these elections. It's an election that has really brought America in a different way of dealing with foreign policy. However, it's a departure from former President Trump, in the sense that while Trump dealt with a much more transactional kind of foreign policy, a one-man show, America first, President Biden is much more advancing in allies, traditional allies, Europeans mainly, under the banner of international liberal order on human rights and other key issues of strengthening the United States. More importantly, I think he also dealt with the issue of competing with China and other countries from a position of strength. That means investments more in technology and all other issues. But we're going to see a quite different pursuit of foreign policy under President Biden, where there are areas of convergence with China as well as areas of divergence.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Monyai. He is the International Relations and Foreign Policy expert, as well as co-director at the University of Johannesburg's Confucius Institute. Well, in his first major foreign policy speech, President Biden said his administration would work with Beijing when it was beneficial for the U.S. He said that China is the United States' most serious competitor and the U.S. would confront China on a number of issues. Regarding Biden's remarks, Beijing says that China is committed to work with the U.S. for development of the two countries, and at the same time, China is determined to safeguard its sovereignty and development interests.
We hope that the U.S. will follow the public opinion of the two countries and the trend of the times, to look at China and bilateral relations in an objective and rational manner. We hope the U.S. will adopt a positive and constructive policy towards China, focus on cooperation, manage differences, promote healthy and stable development of bilateral ties, and work with the international community to advance the noble cause of world peace and development.
Let's move on to Tunisia, which is observing World Cancer Day. The day is marked on February the 4th under the motto, "Screening, only way to defeat cancer." The importance of early screening was emphasized during the event as the World Health Organization and the Union for International Cancer Control helped raise awareness to save millions of lives. And Nshiwashi has the details.
Rojdi Krishan is a 24-year-old IT engineer from Tunis. At 12, he was diagnosed with cancer. Rojdi has survived this disease with the support of his doctors, family and friends.
Going through cancer was a very difficult experience. It was full of suffering and sacrifice. I'm glad to have overcome this journey. I have resumed a normal life, and after several surgeries, chemotherapies and radiotherapies, now I'm practicing sport and working normally. This experience made me stronger and more sociable. I won the fight against cancer that all patients can win.
Manel Gharbi is one of the most respected civil society activists in Tunisia. A few years ago, she lost her daughter to cancer. Since then, Manel and her husband have been accompanying hundreds of cancer patients and helping their families.
I've been through the experience of losing a child. I don't hesitate to help. The association Maram focuses on children with cancer. They need assistance. Many volunteers are supporting the initiative.
The association Maram has inaugurated its first Hope Villa. The facility was donated by a benefactor. It offers free accommodation and housing assistance for cancer patients.
Cancer patients and their parents can stay and live here until the treatment is over. The center offers many activities for children like painting, music and reading. In fact, we are focusing on any activity which could make the children forget about cancer and become stronger while mothers can discuss and rest.
According to the Basic Health Directorate, breast cancer is the most commonly occurring cancer in women in Tunisia, with 3,515 more cases in 2020. Moreover, 2,388 men were diagnosed with lung cancer in 2020. Tunisia also reported 1,058 more cases of colorectal cancer. The Ministry of Health and the civil society in Tunisia are launching a cancer awareness raising campaign to support thousands of patients and citizens. Experts, as well as cancer survivors, assert that getting regular screenings is very important for detecting the early signs of cancer. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The latest in business is coming up after the break. Here's what you can expect.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Well, time now for the latest in business. The Minerals Council of South Africa says mining companies will support the government in the rollout of COVID-19 vaccines as Africa's most industrialized nation battles a surge in infections. Mining companies say they are well placed to support the COVID-19 vaccine plan thanks to decades of experience in dealing with tuberculosis and HIV. CGTN's Angela Coppola has the details.
The scale and reach of the vaccine rollout is the biggest ever undertaken in South Africa, affecting over 40 million people, and all business sectors in the country are involved.
I'm immensely encouraged by the positive sentiment from the mining industry as expressed by the Minerals Council towards the vaccine rollout. Mining companies are well placed to support the vaccine program given their experience with managing tuberculosis and HIV amongst their employees. We must continue to ensure that the health and safety of mine workers remains a priority. But this must also apply to the mine workers' families.
The mining sector has widespread healthcare infrastructure in place. It's needed this to battle against tuberculosis and HIV/AIDS amongst its workers.
Mining, as you're aware, has significant healthcare infrastructure and capacity. That means in terms of healthcare workers and support services as well. And that will enable us to drive the vaccination process. And we certainly hope to play a constructive role as designated points of care under the Department of Health. And this would be particularly important in those regions where there are clusters of mines and mining communities, but also in the sometimes far-flung regions where mining is the dominant economic activity.
The mining industry contributes some 8% to the South African economy, and a vaccine rollout program driven by the sector will affect millions of people. That's over and above the 450,000 people who work on the mines.
Our conservative estimates are that we could vaccinate between 60,000 and 80,000 people a day, if we had the vaccine, of course. And so that would mean in about 2 months, we could vaccinate between 2.5 and 3 million people.
As health authorities finalise their plans for that vaccine rollout, they're going to need to call in all the resources they can find, including the mining sector and their massive health infrastructure. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Tunisia is planning to issue debt worth up to $3 billion this year as it seeks to stabilize its economy. The North African state is embarking on wider economic reforms amid rising protests caused by years of economic slowdown and the COVID-19-induced disruption. From Tunis, here is CGTN's Adnan Shawishi.
The Minister of Economy and Finance declared that the government plans to go to the international market since the 2021 state budget needs financing in order to push reforms and achieve Tunisia's economic targets. Authorities are seeking a new $1 billion loan guarantee arrangement from the United States, which could help it secure the $3 billion in bond issuance.
This year we have a bond
that was issued with the United States guarantee that will be repaid in May and June. As much as we would like to reimburse it on time, and we will do, we will also keep talking with the investors in order to ask them to still be confident in Tunisia and to reinvest in new bonds that could be backed by US guarantee. And we are in the process of discussing that.
Tunisia's 2021 budget forecasts borrowing needs $7.2 billion, including about $5 billion in foreign loans. Ali Khali added that the Tunisian government will launch an economic and financial roadshow in Asia this year.
This new Tunisia will be also a friend of Asia. And we are planning also to address to Asian investors and to see what they could do to invest in Tunisia, whether to invest in some bond issues or to invest in real projects. And we are in the process of finalizing a list of projects, and we will keep visiting many countries in Asia in order to present this program and in order to find the right support from our friends there.
The Tunisian parliament has approved the government's plans. Members of the Finance Commission have said that the state needs foreign financial support to foster the resilience of the national economy.
The financial situation in Tunisia is very difficult. The state needs additional resources to kickstart its economic reforms. This is vital for public finances. The efforts of the Finance Ministry are considerable. Parliament is backing the government's economic orientation.
The House of People's Representatives adopted the draft law approving a €100 million loan agreement between Tunisia and the German Bank for Reconstruction on financing the program to support reforms in the banking and financial sector. The Parliament also approved the €150 million loan contract with the German Development Bank to consolidate public sector reforms.
With a deficit estimated at 11.5% of gross domestic product in 2020 and public debt at 90% of GDP, Tunisia is facing an unprecedented economic crisis which has been deepened by the negative repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, the African Continental Free Trade Area finally came into effect on the 1st of January of this year. The agreement aims to drastically increase intra-African trade by slashing tariffs on several categories of goods by approximately 90% and harmonizing trading rules at a continental level. CGTN's Yasser Kim caught up with Dr. Amani Asfour. She was recently voted in as a president of the Africa Business Council. In this conversation, they explore what's needed to make the area work.
The Africa Business Council is established by the Decision Summit of the African Heads of States. It's as an organized private sector. It's an inclusive business council that includes all the regional economic blocs. We intend actually to have our strategic plan to see how we involve, to have all the private sector in the continent to make sure that first, we have an advocacy campaign that we are leading currently for public procurement, how our African continents, our African governments would procure from African private sector. That's one. Number two is build the capacity of our African private sector for industrialization.
What are the main challenges that face the private sector when trying to expand within the continent? And you as a businesswoman probably has faced it yourself.
There are several challenges that is really on different levels. If we're talking about the infrastructure, which is a very important, and it's very important because we need roads, we need networks, we need maritime, we need aviation, so we need technological infrastructure with reference to our IT communications. We need political engagement, public-private sector partnerships, and most always is information, because as we all know that we have lack of missing information across the whole over the private sector. How do we achieve the business linkages? How to make sure of an inventory of their existing resources on the continent?
How do you see Egypt's role in trying to lead some of these initiatives or trying to expand or increase trade and production and investments within the continent as well.
Now Egypt has also a great role to play because in Egypt there is a lot of scientific experience that can be promoted to our African continent and exported to start industrialization within the continent, to start investment. Even and there is now an academy at the Arab Organization for Industrialization that is training our African sisters and brothers in the private sector for electronic machineries. In Egypt, we have a lot of industries that could be exported to our African continent and invested in. We have 480 industries for medical consumables and supplies, 165 pharmaceutical industries.
You've been the president of the COMESA Business Council. What will happen with the COMESA and the Business Council now that we have the ACFTA?
COMESA Business Council is 21 countries, Common Market for East and Southern Africa. Under the ACFTA, we will have actually a pure harmonization among the REX business councils. This will be coordination among our business council, Economic States for West Africa. They have already harmonized a lot, and they also have at least one currency. So it is building blocks for the ACFTA. It's complementing each other.
Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break and return some sport news, including reinstated CAF chief Ahmed said to attend the CHAN 2020 final on Sunday.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Let's now take a look at what's happening in sport. The Confederation of African Football says its leader, Ahmed, will chair the organization's executive committee on Saturday in Cameroon. The embattled head of African football will assume his official roles from the acting head of the organization, Constant Omari, after being allowed to resume his duties momentarily by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. CGTN Sadiq Shaban reports from Cameroon.
The besieged president of African Football Confederation, Ahmad, is expected to make his first public appearance in 3 months when he visits Cameroon this week. The last time Ahmad was seen in public was 3 months ago, shortly before he contracted COVID-19, and he had to seek treatment both in Egypt and his country, Madagascar. Ahmad will officiate the closing ceremony of this year's African Nation Championship, his first official duty since he was reinstated as the head of African football by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The Malagasy national won the first round of his 5-year FIFA ban on corruption at CAF after the court set aside the FIFA sanction for weeks, pending the hearing and determination of his case. But Ahmad is not off the hook yet. He is still ineligible to defend his seat as African football head in next month's elections. Experts say Ahmad faces a big task convincing the CAF Ethics Review Committee to overturn his exclusion from the polls.
President Ahmad, who came in with the promise that he was going to transform African football, that he was going to install transparency, and that he was going to install good governance. Until now, cognizant of the scandals or the troubles that's plagued his first mandate, I mean, you'll be tempted to think that he's not practicing what he preached. And when you're able to look at this, the average football diehard will tell his or herself that I do not want to go through this. I mean, we had Issa Hayatou at the helm of the Confederation of African Football for several years. We didn't have this much scandals. And even when things like that came up, Issa Hayatou was able to clear his name.
Ahmad's legal team have advised him to keep his silence until his appeal is heard on March 2nd, just 10 days to the polls. Meanwhile, 4 other candidates, Jacques Anouma from Côte d'Ivoire, Patrice Motsepe from South Africa, Yaya Ahmed from Mauritania, and Augustin Senghor from Senegal have all been cleared by CAF and FIFA in the race to replace Ahmad as head of African football. Sadiq Shaban, CGTN, in Douala, Cameroon.
The World Anti-Doping Agency has given clearance for athletes to take vaccines offering protection against COVID-19 without fear of breaching anti-doping regulations. Speaking to the press on Friday, WADA's Senior Executive Director, Sciences and International Partnerships, Dr. Olivier Rabin, said there was no reason to believe the materials contained in vaccines